Hey everyone, this is Bill.McCartney from Coldwell Realty in Scottsdale, Arizona. And today I wanted to review with you the information, the latest market overview for the city of Scottsdale. I do want to note that this is specific to single family properties in the city of Scottsdale. However, if you're interested in condos and townhouses and that report or that information and those trends, I'm going to include in the description a link to a report that you can download from there. And I'll also include a copy of this report for you as well. So if you have any questions, by all means, feel free to send me a message and I can email that to you if you're having trouble. But let's dive into the overview here. And there were three things that I noticed this month when I looked at this data. And the first and foremost were the new listings, right? We're always looking to see how much is coming to the market, what's selling, what are the values, what are the trends, to really try to help our clients, quite frankly, make intelligent and informed decisions that are best for their family. And what I noticed here with new listings for the month of October, we had 511 properties come to the market in those 31 days. Last month, we had 519 properties listed for sale. However, if I look at this 3-month average from July through September, we did see a significant increase from, that data versus what we're seeing more recently. So there's an increase in listings coming to the market. And when I compare that to October of last year, there is still an increase. It's a little bit more than 9% from what we saw last year. Now, what this can be telling us is that maybe more properties are coming to the market. And as we continue to watch this information and see how it all unfolds, we want to track ultimately the amount of inventory, what the month supply looks like, and the relationship really between supply and demand, because ultimately that's going to have an impact on values. And I think that's by and large the question that so many people have today. With affordability, what's going to happen with values? Because a lot of people are feeling this pinch. So that's the first thing that I noticed. And then the second thing that I noticed was the median sales price. And we look at the median sales price for the month of October, it was $1,075,000. Compare that to September, just 1 month, there was a difference of $100,000, and that's significant as well. And when we compare that to the 3-month average, well, it's pretty close to that 975 at 980,500. And then last year at this time, we had 995,000. So if we're just looking at this information, and this is why I want to point this out, you might think that values have gone up considerably. And while that might be true, it's really important to take a look at the big picture, to take a look at all of the data, because there's other things that influence the rise in values in a market. And I think as we go through this, you'll see that maybe it's not so scary, particularly if you're a buyer, and maybe it's not so opportunistic if you're a seller. But we'll look at that information in a little bit more detail here. And then the third thing that I noticed was the month supply of inventory. So we ended the month of October with just under 5 months of inventory. And if we look at where we were in September, we had 4 months. In July, that average, we had a little over 3 months. So remember, we're looking at the relationship between supply and demand. And if we're just looking at this window of time right here, we're saying that, oh, you know what, we're getting closer to that balanced market. And that might be the case. However, when I look at last year at the same time, well, we had just under 5 months supply then too. So I'm wondering and I'm thinking that maybe there's a little bit more seasonality involved in this. And the market's been really crazy over the last 3 years, which is kind of the information we're looking at here. And what I've noticed is that in the last year, we've seen almost like a sense of like a return to seasonality. So as we go through the information and the illustrations, you might get a little bit better idea as to what I'm talking about. So let's take a look at the median sales price and the average sales price and just see where we're trending. Clearly, you can see here that when you look over the last 3 years, and you know what the market's done, you've heard it in the news, and you've got your own opinions about it. Maybe your family has some opinions about where the market's going to go, but this is what's actually happened. And when you look at these circle points here that are represented in these graphs, those all represent the same month, year over year, right? So that you can kind of compare the trends. And if you connect the dots, so to speak, you'll notice that there is a trend upward in values, and that's true. Things have been getting more and more expensive, not just in housing, but in, quite frankly, everything that we purchase today. You'll also notice that there are some, peaks and valleys along this curve here. So there's always going to be some adjustment of the data. And the thing that really I kind of want to point out here is that sometimes when you're looking at the media and you're looking at articles and reading the headlines, they might be reporting on information that is comparative to, this month versus last month, or this month versus the same time last year. And that's great, and that gives you maybe some sense as to what's happening. But it's so important to see the big picture. And by looking at it, in this way, and with your agent when you're looking to maybe buy a home, sell a home, or even just have questions about buying or selling a home, it's really important to take a look at the big picture. As we look at the list to sales price ratio, I think this is pretty evident of what we've seen in the market over the last few years. And you remember after COVID, when the doors kind of opened up, quite frankly, things just went nuts. And this 100% basically means that's the seller's asking price. And there was a period of time where, on average, every homeowner was getting more than what they were asking. If you were buying a home in 2020, 2021, or even the beginning of 22, you actually, you were competing with multiple offers, the prices were getting bid up. Here in the Valley, we had a lot of investors or iBuyers, and they were pushing values up. And, and it was a really tough time to be a buyer. However, I would imagine now that you've, hindsight's 2020, you would love to buy a home a year and a half or 2 years ago because the interest rates were so different. So it also gave people, I would say, a false sense of security about the market, or not even a false sense of security. It really gave them just an increased affordability, which expanded the buyer pool and expanded the market in the way that we saw. As we saw those interest rates drop, we also saw the leverage that sellers had drop too, because it impacted the buyer's affordability. So since we've seen the increase in the mortgage rates hovering now about 8%, we see a little bit more return to what I would consider to be relatively normal, right? It's that normal relationship between the seller's asking price, the buyer's ultimate sales price, and the ability to negotiate that price. It's also become a little bit less competitive, which we'll address in the demand side of things. So here we are looking at the number of properties sold, and this is the demand side of things. When we looked at when those interest rates were what they were, and this line here, follows very closely what we just saw in the list to sales price ratio. This is the number of sold properties. So, because of that affordability, people were able to buy a lot more home, and it didn't impact their monthly bills in the same way because the money was cheap. However, since those rates have increased, we've seen the demand side come down significantly, which if you're a buyer and you have the ability to buy now and affordability hasn't priced you out of the market, you actually have some pretty good leverage here because you're not competing with as many buyers in the market. If you're a seller, however, you do want to take into consideration this information as well, because there are less buyers in the market, and you want to make sure that when you speak with your agent, you're positioning that property at a point that's actually going to sell. And that's an important number to kind of take a look at, because ultimately it will have an impact on your experience when you list your home for sale. Now, when we look at the average days on market, clearly we've seen an increase in the time it takes to sell a property. Although I will note, just for the month of October, all of the homes that went pending did so, or at least I should say 58% of them went pending within 30 days of coming to the market. So it's still a really good market. It's a strong market if you're a seller. Don't let this information have you feel like, oh no, the sky is falling, the market's collapsing, because it's not by any means. It's still a very healthy market. Maybe you just don't have the complete insanity that we had a year and a half or 2 years ago. So, on average, it was taking 48 months to sell a property. Last year at this time, it was 46, not months, days. And, you see the relationship here historically too. The average sales price per square foot, this is actually a really, really important thing to take a look at, because we can't just take a look at, the median sales price and average sales price independent of the composition of what's selling in the market. What I mean by that is that you have, from one month to the next, maybe a lot of smaller homes selling or a lot of larger homes selling. And that can actually influence that volatility within the median sales price or average sales price graphs. This tends to kind of average things out a little bit more and equalize the data, if you will, because it's comparing it based on the square footage of homes on average versus the number of homes and where they actually sold, if that makes sense. However, when you do look at this information, clearly the trend is still upward, because that has been the trend in terms of values in the past. And then we look at the inventory. This is the number of homes that we currently have available for sale in the city of Scottsdale. Again, single family homes only. We ended the month with a little over 1,300 properties for sale. Last year, it wasn't that far off. We had pretty much, pretty close to it, just under, 1,400 homes. But if we look back over the past when things were crazy, there was so few homes available for sale. And again, it's because that demand curve was so strong that they were really absorbing all of that property that would come to market very, very quickly. And it would affect ultimately the inventory that was available to any buyer on the market. So again, if you're a buyer, you've actually got some options here, and you have a little bit of flexibility to maybe negotiate terms that are better for you. And in this environment, what I'm actually seeing from buyers is they're looking to negotiate conditions that will help them to buy down the interest rate, which will help them with the affordability of that property. Now, that's a really good thing as a buyer if you're going to be there long term, because you can buy down the rate full, like for the full term of the loan. You don't have to do a temporary buy down. You can do a full term buy down. And if you're a seller, I would maybe consider even offering that, because it can help the buyer pay a certain price for the home that helps you to agree on those price terms and conditions. As we look at the new listings that are coming to the market, and I referenced this at the beginning of this video, we actually see some of the seasonality in this, right? So November, December, typically the winter months, you'll see less homes coming to the market. And in the spring, February, March, April, May, June, July is when you kind of see that the new listings, tend to peak and then soften a little bit as the summertime comes. And then here we are again in the winter months, and then here we are again in the spring months, and then the winter months. This year, however, things looked a little bit different, and I'll explain why. Granted, we saw an increase in mortgage rates in 2022, but we've also continued to see that interest rate increase in 2023. And where this kind of flattened the number of listings coming to the market, what I've heard from any potential sellers is that, I have a mortgage rate now of 3%. If I were to buy another home, that rate's around 8%, and for much of the year it was maybe in the 7s, So when you look at this data, a lot of homeowners are saying, well, I don't have to move, and right now it's really expensive to move. So unless they have any compelling reason to move, like the top 3 things would be death or probate. Those kind of properties are coming to market and they're selling. The families don't want to hold on to them. They don't want to do anything with them, and they want to capitalize on the equity that they have in those properties. We also see people that are going through divorce. Well, clearly they don't want to live together anymore, so they will sell those homes and go their separate ways. And then we also see people who are relocating for job purposes. Those seem to be really the top 3 reason that people are selling. However, I will say this, if you're enjoying that 3% or even sub 3% interest rate, if you do want to make that move, you may want to consider renting the property that you have if that's an option for you, because it can help you to offset the increase of that interest expense that you'd have in your next property, and you can ultimately cash flow the property that you are coming from. So if you want any more information about that, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. So that's what we look at with the real estate market in Scottsdale, Arizona. This is for October of 2023. If you found this video helpful at all, please hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to continue to get these videos, subscribe and hit that alert bell. And if you have any questions, let's talk.